Hey, Andy.
Hey, there we go. We're live.
Yep, we are. So I know this is a bit impromptu, so and we're going to do some Q&A. So obviously, we need to take some time and let some questions come in. But the plan was originally to have Ryan and I, Ryan's our head of strategy here, talk about product strategy, how we decide what to do, how we decide what not to do, how we decide what to do when we decide to do it, who should work on it, all that kind of stuff. And turns out Ryan's internet's down. So mine was down yesterday, his is down today. And so we're waiting for that to come back online. So hopefully maybe later today, if Ryan's internet's back, we can jump in and do that. But in the meantime, I figured since I already had time carved out for this, let's just hop online and see if anyone has any questions.
Cool.
So for those who are watching, you can of course ask on Twitch. It's also broadcast on Twitter. And then #AskJF will get our attention. And we'll see what shakes out. So, Andy, I actually had a question for you. I thought this was kind of interesting. I know your company, Detroit Bus Company. Obviously, no one's taking buses.
No.
So that hurts. So what is the company doing to keep people employed? What can you do with the space that you have? What can you do? What are you doing?
Yeah, we made a radical pivot. I like the leading question. We converted our warehouse into a hand sanitizer production line. So we have the same staff that used to rent bus reservations and drive buses and guide tours. They're blending hand sanitizer. The World Health Organization published a formula that anybody can use. It's isopropyl alcohol, which is very hard to get, glycerin and hydrogen peroxide and distilled water. So I thought we can do that. So a local Detroit company supplied us with the bottles. Local Detroit company supplied the labels. And so there's tons of need for stuff like this, masks. And I have some friends who are, they own like a large sewing company and they've pivoted totally to masks and they're selling them basically for material. So I think there is market need for stuff out there. Remote software, like Basecamp's one of them, but hard stuff like hand sanitizers and masks and that market can't be stated enough. So if your company can switch and do something like that, let's do it. Like there's nothing else to do. We've applied for all the SBA loans and stuff, but I'm not optimistic that's going to work out. I'm just a pessimist when it comes to government bucks. So, working's better than not working.
A friend of mine here in Chicago runs a company called Defy Bags. It's DEFY. I think it's DEFYBAGS.com. Yeah. And, he's struggling because his bags are amazing, but no one needs bags right now. Like you're not traveling, you're not going to work. But they know how to sew. They know how to use material. They have a lot of material. They have a lot of skill. And so they're making themselves available to any industry that right now that needs sewing work, that needs manufacturing work, and trying to keep their crew busy as well. They are selling some bags, but just of course sales have cratered as you'd expect. So, but like all these companies have different skills and they can put them out there. And I think he went on LinkedIn, he went to a few other places saying, hey, if anyone needs something manufactured, including special purpose bags that we normally wouldn't make, but if people need to transport a lot of things medically or whatever it might be, we can change our patterns and make some stuff for you. So I think it's cool to see companies. Of course, many of them are forced to, but to figure out how to use what they can do. In his case, sort of using their core skills. In your case, or in Detroit Bus Company, just like saying, we have people, we have space, there's a formula online, we can get materials. Let's do something with this and help people out. So I love seeing things like that.
Yeah, and I think there's lots and lots of ways to do this outside of just the hard goods. Like if you're normally doing a website building or you're doing digital marketing for people, there's a need for that. Like tons of restaurants right now are trying to figure out, how do we go online? How do we set up online order delivery? How do we do this in a safe way? And they just don't have the core competency to do that. It's not their thing. So I think putting a shingle out there and saying like, hey, are you a restaurant who's trying to go remote? Like we can help you do that. It seems easy when you're an internet literate folk or a person, but if you're not normally in that space, even a Squarespace site can seem really difficult. So like finding how you can use whatever skill set you've got, making sanitizer is not super different because it's a process driven thing. With the buses, we make sure that we handle them in a procedural way. It's the same with mixing and bottling stuff. So it's not so different from what we do, but It is kind of weird. I wouldn't have thought a month ago we'd be making hand sanitizer.
People need it.
Yeah.
In fact, I made some myself a few nights ago using that same recipe, and it's funny. It's like it's pretty liquidy. It's a lot less like gelatinous than I thought it would be. Like you get Purell at the store, it's like gel. This is more like a liquid, but it's great. It like gets all over your hands pretty quickly, and then you smell like alcohol for a while. And
it's intense.
That worked. Yeah, that feels good.
We got a couple good questions in.
Sure, let's go.
This is kind of strategy. How do you know when you're onto something?
I love this one.
Yeah.
For me, almost everything in business, the answer is the same. It's feel. It's like, how does it feel? Does it feel like you're onto something? Do you get goosebumps? Do you get excited about it? Can you not wait to work on it tomorrow when you put it away for the night? And then does it branch out? So like sometimes you can feel like you're onto something and it kind of stops. It doesn't have a lot of headroom. It kind of is like you feel like you got a few feet of headroom and then the idea is over. But when I feel like we're really onto something, like there's this nugget and you're like, oh, but wait, we could do that. Oh, what if it did this and then that? Oh my God, you know what sucks is when this happens. And what if we did this? And you start to see these branches and you start to see like, essentially these tributaries sprouting off or whatever analogy you want to use. But that's what gets me excited and how I know we're onto something. And there are few feelings, in my opinion, in business as exciting as feeling like you're onto something. I mean, getting your first sale is exciting. Every subsequent sale after that is a lot less exciting. But feeling like you're onto something new or you're going somewhere interesting or something's happening that you couldn't break through a few days before is great. So, and by the way, I think what's important here is not to conflate being onto something with making that into a good business. There's lots of great ideas that go nowhere or they go somewhere, but they're not viable. So when I think about being onto something, I don't think about it initially from a business perspective, but it has to get there pretty quickly for me. Being able to sell something or generate revenue off something is a core fundamental feature of anything that you're going to make for your business, in my opinion. So if I can't see a way there pretty early, the idea begins to die out. But when those two things come together, you feel it and you know it.
Yeah, it's the same with marketing projects too. That's kind of how our conversations go. We start very broad and fun, and wouldn't it be wild? And then we sort of get down to like, is this actually going to work? Is this be helpful to people? Is this going to add to the noise? Like, there's like a filtering that happens, and you get down to like, are we actually going to spend money on this? I was talking to Eddie from that startup yesterday who does marketing activations, and he was like, what decision-making process do you use? And I said, well, first it's got to be like exciting on the get-go, and it's a cool concept that they've come up with, but also like, is anyone actually going to see the thing? And a little hard right now for an out-of-home marketing project during a lockdown. So, it's got to make business sense at the end of the day. Yeah,
it's tricky. Like billboards are some things that we've been exploring, and we did a couple things on bike stands and whatnot. And it's like right now, no one's driving, no one's outside, no one's going to see anything. So another avenue struck down essentially, because we're not doing Google, we're not doing Facebook. Well, let's do outside of the home stuff. Well, no one's outside of their home right now. So it's an interesting moment here. But anyway, but I think there's also, just to think ahead, there's opportunities now to lock things in. Like at some point, this is going to end. And right now, a lot of companies are going to be struggling and they're looking for maybe longer term deals. So maybe we could lock down something that lasts for a year. And for the next 3 months, it might be lost money in a sense. But then 3 months after that, we're like, wow, we're so stoked that we got this deal on this thing that we had to lose 3 months for. But now we have 9 months of like, wow, how'd you get that deal kind of feeling? So, these are moments or opportunities, and it doesn't mean like we're going to always make the right call, but like I like to look at these as opportunities to do something interesting and to be a little bit more daring. I think one of the true legacies of this moment is going to be the recognition that high fidelity doesn't matter that much. I was on CNBC yesterday or the day before. I think it's actually airing today, and the anchor is in his house because that's where everyone is. And you know what? The show goes on. It's fine. The interview is just as good as it would have been if I was in a studio and he was in a studio and the other guest was in a studio, but we were all calling in from our homes and it was just fine. And I think people are going to begin to realize that a lot of things are just fine. And they're not going to worry too much about some of these details that they would normally stress over or spend a lot of money on or worry about. they don't matter that much. And I think that that's going to be one of the great lasting legacies here.
Yeah, like after 2008, there was all kinds of things that were possible. Landlords were willing to make deals. They just weren't able to make when the market was booming. And so like, I think small businesses might get a better chance in sort of the churn. We got started in 2010 with the Busco around there. And it just would not have been possible if it was a huge booming market. I mean, obviously, like, we'd prefer to not have the pandemic. This is a terrible, sad thing. But if you're in a small business and you didn't have the opportunity before, maybe you do now. Like, it's just a time for newness. Yes. We got a good one in from Twitter. What are one or two things you've done as a CEO to provide psychological safety for your team, to challenge you, and also for them not to be afraid to make mistakes?
I don't know if this is about like today's environment or in general. I mean, I try to be a good listener. I try to encourage people to surprise me. This is something I'll often tell people, which is like, just surprise me more. Surprise me. Like I want to be surprised. I think hopefully that's some way to encourage people to bring new ideas to the table. I try not to, although sometimes I do reflexively. I can be dismissive of an idea because I'm dismissive of my own ideas in the same way, where like I'll hear something, go, no, that's not going to work, or whatever. But I have to remember that, like, I have to be more careful when I say that to other people. I can take it myself, but to hear it from someone else, especially someone who writes your paycheck and owns the business, it weighs a ton. So I have to be very careful about that. I've actually written a little bit about this idea that the owner's word weighs a ton, which basically means like anyone who's in a position of power, this is an owner, but it could be a team lead. It could be anyone who's responsible for people below them, in an org chart sense. The higher up you are, the more your word weighs, and people are going to take that word in ways you didn't anticipate. Like, you might just throw an idea out, or you might say, no, I don't think so, or I'm not so sure. And to them, that might be a total lockdown, shutdown. Like, ooh, he doesn't want that, or she doesn't want that. I'm out. Like, I'm not going to even make any more suggestions. So it's important, I think, to remember that what might be going on in my head is just like a natural, I'm not sure about that, but what about something else? To me, is an avenue to explore the idea. It could, though, come off as a shutdown, as a dead end. And I have to be careful about that. And I'm not always great at that, for sure. I'm sure plenty of people I work with would say the same thing. So I have to constantly remind myself that what I'm about to say is going to probably be taken in a way that I was not intending, in a sense. But also, I think the longer you work with someone, the more forgiving people are about those sorts of things, and the more understanding they are. I think that the real challenge is working with newer employees, especially, who aren't used to that quite yet. So I think that's something that's really important. As far as being afraid to make mistakes, I mean, we all make mistakes all the time. It's just part of everything. So, there's no direct ramifications for mistakes being made. I mean, like, if you make the same mistake many, many times in a row, that's a problem. As long as you're making new mistakes, not really a problem. Making the same old mistake over and over, that's a little bit more of a problem. And we have paths here in terms of performance plans and training and stuff to get people off of that loop. But making new mistakes, I don't see that as a problem at all. So I don't think you're going to hear any pushback internally from people who try to do something and doesn't work out. I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's a benefit of us submitting a lot of our ideas in like written form, like long form, that you can like consider them and other people can consider them, and you get a chance to like not have your emotional reaction like hit, because like the first time you hear almost any idea that's new, the gut is like, nah, like it's just natural to be like, that sounds expensive and maybe not possible. But since we do these longer form pitches, I find that we can more clearly explain all the aspects of it. It's a benefit of how we work.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing is that because we encourage people to write things up rather than say them out loud, there's actually a lot less pressure and there's more pressure in some ways, but less pressure in other ways, because you're not like on stage staring someone down who has to respond to you immediately. I mean, if you think about being in a meeting and presenting an idea to somebody, and you're like, you stop talking, and they don't say anything for 15 minutes because they're thinking about it, that would be the most awkward, horrible experience ever, right? But what ends up happening is people are basically expected to immediately respond, because that's what you do in a conversation. And therefore, judgment happens very quickly. When you write things up and you put it out there, people tend to think about it some more and run around their head some more and give it 5 minutes before they respond. And that doesn't mean the responses are going to be all positive or anything like that. And also it can be daunting if you put your idea out there and there's crickets for a day. That's another like not necessarily a good feeling. But I do feel like being able to write things up and think things through and present things exactly the way you want is a little bit less intimidating than having to sit in front of somebody and present something, essentially being on stage in real time and expecting that immediate response back. And maybe you're sitting in a room full of 9 people who are judging you. All their eyes are on you. You got 18 eyes on you. It's intimidating. So I think writing things up helps to soften that a little bit as well. And the other thing I've tried to do internally, not always great at it, but if there's a discussion or a debate going on internally, I try to not respond for a while. I like other people to get their voices in first, because if I jump in or David jumps in, it tends to end a conversation. And that's not what I want to happen. So although, again, David and I both make mistakes about this, we jump in quickly on something because we have a strong opinion about it. But I think it's better to let other people discuss it first amongst themselves, see some different perspectives before we chime in. Otherwise, it can end things soon. So if you are a team lead, a manager, an owner, whatever, C-level person, whatever it is, like remember that when you come into any conversation, everything changes about that conversation. It just does. No matter how chummy you think you are and how everyone you think likes you, none of those things matter. There's some real power dynamics here, regardless of situation, and the conversation begins to change immediately when you jump in. So be careful about that.
Here's a fun one, especially since we're working on a project called Hey with Hey.com. How do you go about naming products?
Man, this is one of my favorite things to do. I love naming stuff. I absolutely love it. I find that the harder you have to think of the name, the worse the name is going to be. And the moment you go to the thesaurus, you're screwed. Like you can't go to the thesaurus. Like it's just like you're in trouble at that point. So what I found is like the name has to come to me. I can't stress over it or work on it. It just has to happen. Basecamp happened. You jog your mind for a minute and boom. Oh, we need to okay. Projects are like a journey. And where do people get together on a journey? Where do people collect on a journey? Where do people come together on a journey? Where do people live together and work together on a journey? Like, well, a base camp, like if you're thinking about mountain climbing, for example, it's base camp. Like I want to establish a base camp for this, and doing a project is like climbing a mountain. It's like, bam, that just nailed it. And like basecamp.com wasn't available though. So we just went with basecamphq.com. I didn't want the name to be driven by the domain because if the name was that good, like we'll just deal with it and call it a Basecamp HQ or call it something else. And in fact, when we launched Basecamp, you could actually pick from 5 different domains that you could use for your own Basecamp account. So it was like Group Hub, Client Section. I don't remember the other ones, but there was 5 of them, I believe. Anyway, point is that, and then like a number of years later, we had the opportunity to buy basecamp.com, and then we did. Did we need to? No. Was it a luxury? Yes, absolutely. Could we afford it? Yes. If we couldn't have, we wouldn't have done it. So we did it eventually, but it didn't stop me from the name. The same thing is true with Campfire, our group chat tool, which we came out with in 06 or 07, 06, I think it was. Love that name for a group communication tool, Campfire, perfect. In fact, we even considered at one point renaming Basecamp to Campfire, but domain wasn't available. So we did campfirenow.com, and we never ended up getting Campfire, so that's fine. Highrise HQ, Backpack, backpackit.com. None of those domains were available. We just went with them. However, for this new thing we're doing called Hey, H-E-Y, this new email thing, we had a domain called Haystack, Haystack, and that was the working title for a while, and that was going to be the name of the product, unless we could get Hey.com, because Hey was actually like what I really wanted to call the product, although I still liked Haystack. Haystack was a domain we already had, and a product name we actually had used in the past. But man, if we could get Hey, like let's do it. So I wrote this up on our blog, Signal versus Noise. I think I started looking into this domain or this name the end of 2018, reached out to the person who owned it, something like 60 something emails later, and almost a year later, or whatever it was, we ended up acquiring that, and that's going to be the name of the product. So HEY.com is the domain. So that was an example of, I could have lived with Haystack, would have been fine, but there was this opportunity to do something unique. But had we not been able to get Hey.com, I don't think we would have called it Hey, Hey Mail or Hey Now or something, because the idea was with Hey, you're going to get an email address. And the whole point of a great email address, well, not the whole point, but like the whole point of Hey.com was that like you get a really, really, really short email address. So that was an important part of it. The other products, Basecamp, Campfire, Haystack, or High-Rise, Backpack, and some other things, the domain didn't matter quite as much. So we were okay with going with like an extended version of that. But anyway, that's that. And maybe, you know, look, like maybe I'm just old school that like I need the .com, but like I need the .com, you know, that's just how we want to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's like instant authority too, you know, like something that's at hey.com, like it's going to be pretty good. I guess it just comes with that credence. If it was hey.co, it just is immediately different. I don't know. I think maybe it is old school. You know, if you had a gateway computer, you probably care about .com. That's
Yep.
like, that's the timeline.
Totally.
Let's roll with this one. How are you thinking about long-term product strategy? Thinking more about remote in the future?
Well, so we're always remote. We've always been remote for 20 years. Basically, we've been working remotely. So our natural instinct is to build tools that work for local and remote teams. I find it interesting that there's many products out there that are being touted as remote work tools built by companies that don't allow remote working. That to me is a red flag. We've always been remote. We know what it means to actually literally work remote. And so therefore, we've built those principles and concepts into Basecamp. And with Hey coming out soon, Hey, I mean, is an email tool, but it's also going to be there's going to be a business version too, which is going to have some collaborative stuff in there, which is great for remote working as well. But as far as long-term product strategy, we used to have multiple products. We've gone down to one now, which is Basecamp, and we're about to launch a second. Why? Why did we decide to go back to launching another product when we said we're going to go all in just on one product? Well, there's a number of reasons, but one thing we've realized is that, you know, as a product matures, like Basecamp 3, the current version, is almost 4 years old now, and we're beginning to work on Basecamp 4, which will be out next year, which is going to be amazing, and I cannot wait to get that thing out. It's going to be just, we got so many cool ideas for it. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited for this next version. But in the meantime, like we still have Basecamp 3, and we're about to do some work on that right now as well. But we think this idea of moving back and forth between two products is actually going to be a benefit. We're calling it tick-tock development. Spend a cycle on Basecamp, spend a cycle on Hey, spend a cycle on Basecamp, spend a cycle on Hey, perhaps split teams so we can do both at once, a little bit here and there. But the idea is that every time we've ever worked on a new product, we come up with brand new ideas that we can then bring into Basecamp. And then the next version of Basecamp has new ideas that we can bring into another product. And I think this idea of bridging two worlds and being able to do radically different designs, radically different product concepts, opens our eyes to new ideas, both technically and on the design or user experience side, that we can bring back. But if you're just staring at one thing for a long time and working on one thing, you don't have as much room to really literally explore something new. Even when we do Basecamp 4, like we can't go super far afield. It still is basically Basecamp that we all know and love, but it's a new take on it, some new tools, a bunch of stuff people have been asking for, all that stuff, but we can't really start from scratch. We're not really starting from scratch, even though every time we do a new version, we essentially kind of start from scratch, although this version is going to be a little bit different. But it's still, we're starting from scratch with a blueprint already drawn for us, compared to when we built Hey, blueprint was empty. Starting from scratch, true scratch, no legacy decisions, no legacy ideas, no legacy expectations. What do we want email to be moving forward? I don't care what Gmail's done. I don't care what this other company's done. That's what they've done. What are we going to do from scratch? We don't have that opportunity with Basecamp because we already have 16 years of legacy Basecamp and experience and exposure in the market. So that's what's exciting about doing two things, and one of them being brand new. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. So we're about to do another cycle on Basecamp 3 and bring some really cool improvements over the next 6 weeks to that. It's going to start in a couple weeks, then 6 weeks. Hey is going to launch this year, 2 versions of it, personal and business. Probably going to launch separately. And then Basecamp 4 is coming next year. And we've even talked about launching another product this year, which we're tentatively calling the Insider, which that's all I'll say at this moment. I don't know if we're going to do that because of the COVID thing. We kind of our schedule kind of got pushed and whatnot, but we'll see. But so we've got a few new things baking. We're not hiring new people. We just did hire 1 new programmer to join the R&F team, which is research and fidelity team, which works on like most of our JavaScript stuff and our sort of experimental frameworks and experimental ideas. But other than that, we're not hiring up currently. So we're not really thinking about that long term. But anyway, that's kind of my take on that. I hope that answered the question. You know, I never know sometimes if I have answered these questions or not, but hopefully I'm getting somewhere.
I think the more vague the question, it's harder to like really nail it. Like this one is pretty straightforward because we live this every day. How to get your team to write more, to engage more in Basecamp and organize into Basecamp the way it should. I've experienced this myself where you send all the Basecamp logins to people and you're just expecting them to put things in the right order. So how should people do it?
Yeah, you know, this is something we haven't been great at. And David and I just did a live stream a few days ago on like how we use Basecamp. And I hope more people can check that out or will check that out because, and that's, if you go to twitch.tv/Basecamp, scroll down a little bit. I don't know what that one's called. Andy, if you could check real quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a really good one to watch in terms of like how to actually really use Basecamp to its fullest. But how do you get your team to write more and engage more in Basecamp? First off, there's no right way or wrong way to use Basecamp. Basecamp is a very flexible tool that can do a whole bunch of different things. It replaces 4 or 5 or 6 different products. You don't need Slack if you have Basecamp. You don't need Trello if you have Basecamp. You don't need Asana if you have Basecamp. You don't need Google Docs if you have Basecamp. You don't need a lot of these things. Basecamp replaces all those things. But for some companies, they're not going to use all the different tools. They might use 1 or 2 or 3 in different ways and whatever. However, use it. As long as it works for you, it's fine for you. So there's no real rules there. But one of the things I would encourage people to do is use the automatic check-ins feature, specifically to keep everyone, help people reflect on the work they're about to do and the work they've done. That will get people in the habit of writing. So if you turn on the check-in that asks people what they've worked on at the end of every day and encourage people, or even require people to do it, if you don't have people who are doing it, begin to require it for a while, then people will begin to write and they'll reflect at the end of the day about what they worked on. And on Monday morning, they can write up what they plan on working on this week. And you start to get people in this rhythm of writing instead of speaking, instead of getting up and doing a status meeting. Like a lot of companies have status meetings every Monday morning, or all hands or stand-ups or whatever. And you know what they do with those? They go around and everyone just speaks out loud about what they're planning on doing this week or what's going on right now. There's nothing about right now that's happening right now in those meetings. Those are all descriptions of things that are going to maybe happen or things that have happened in the past. None of that stuff's about right now. So it's better written up instead. Write it down, save everybody an hour. And if you have 10 people in that meeting, you've just saved 10 hours. Think about how much at the end of every week, you're like, I wish we had more time. Well, you do, by the way. You have lots of time. Just don't waste it on meetings. And you have a lot more time during the week to actually do the work. Have people write this stuff up instead and then read it and get back to people via writing if they want to later on. And you end up saving a lot of time. So I would encourage people to begin practicing by doing the check-ins, but also by recognizing the amount of time that you're saving the company and the amount of additional time people have because they're not being stuck in meetings and being pulled away from their work. So I think that's an important way to pitch this, that you're actually going to have more time during the week if you write in Basecamp versus just pulling people into a room and having meetings, that sort of thing. The other thing is that like not everyone's a great writer. Maybe there's a few great writers in your company and they can help people get better. You can ask someone, this happens at Basecamp, people sometimes write messages and they ask someone else to look them over before they post them. So any draft that you write in Basecamp, any message draft, for example, you can get a link before it's published and hand that over to someone else and have them read it and give you some suggestions before you publish it. So that kind of stuff can be really handy too if you are a little bit afraid of writing something up and publishing it without someone else looking at it first. So that's some other little techniques and tips.
Yeah, they having the threshold be low, like just if someone wants to do some bullet points, that's totally cool. And it's like so much easier if you're in a rush or you're feeling stressed, just to bang out some bullet points. Also, I found that people usually will do what the leader does. So if you want people to organize stuff in Basecamp, you as the leader need to put it in Basecamp. A lot of folks are looking for the updates, but they're not willing to give any. So it's frequently monkey see, monkey do. If I'm not sure how to do something, I'll go and look how you or Jane or someone else has done it, because have great format for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's actually a great point. And I'm glad you made it, which is that if I'm telling people to write stuff up, but all I'm doing is like pulling people into meetings, then like I'm a liar. And who's going to believe that? So you do have to lead by example. While sometimes, we'll jump on a video call or something if we need to here and there to go over something in detail that is more at the debate stage of a discussion. Video is great for that, but to just share a fundamental basic idea, writing is a lot better. And so writing and sketching and sharing, pictures or whatever it might be. So that's what we tend to do. And David and I try to take the lead on that and write up as much as we can. Like this morning, people are curious, like, how's the people, I'm hearing like unemployment numbers came out today in the US, 6.6 million, I think it was, or 6 million, something like that. People are naturally anxious. Like, we're not laying anybody off, but like, shit, all people's friends are getting laid off and businesses are closing and everyone knows someone who's losing their job. And so people are naturally nervous. So I wrote up something this morning, like, how's the business doing? Our business is doing great. Sales are up, like we're doing fine. Cancellations are up a bit too, but like not the sales are up much more than cancellations. So we're fine. Now I could have called an all hands. I could have like stopped everyone from doing their work and given everyone a link to go have 56 faces on a Zoom video thing or a Skype video or whatever thing you want to use. And I could have said all that out loud and it could have taken an hour to talk about it. And I could have pulled 56 people off their work and taken an hour, like literally stolen an hour of their day from them. That's what I could have done, but I didn't. We don't do it that way. We write it up instead. So I wrote something up, posted it to Basecamp, and now everyone can read it on their own time. And I didn't take anybody's time. And to read it, it only takes 2 minutes, but to sit in a meeting takes 58 additional minutes. That's the problem with meetings. You don't need to sit there the whole time. So anyway, that's what we do. And that's how we try to lead here and give people examples of how to present information and share information.
I love this add-on too that Aaron put on, that you can search and read forever what's up there. So, I've done a bunch of research on like what marketing we've tried before. And if that wasn't written up and organized, I would never be able to find that stuff. I just search marketing in a group chat. Good luck. This is nice because it's like the history of the company laid out going way back. I mean, we've got BC2 and BC1 classic accounts. I've checked them all.
I'm so glad you mentioned this too, or Aaron who added this. Meetings are only good for the people who are there. The people who exist in a company over time is going to be significantly higher than the number of people that were in that one meeting. And new employees join companies all the time and other employees leave companies and like there's turnover. And where do you go to get information that was important and discussed in a meeting? It's gone. Now you could say, well, there's meeting minutes and someone's taking notes. Probably not in most cases, and they're not that great usually either, and they're not presented in the same way that you would if you were writing something up as the presentation method, because a lot of transcriptions essentially are kind of shorthand and details and nuance is missing. So I think what's important is that when you think about writing something up, what you get out of that is far more than just the people who can read it today, but it's the next employee who joins in a week or 2 or a month or a year or 3 years. You can see a history. Like I remember when Jane, who's our head of data, joined, we had someone else in that role for, I think he was here for 7 years, maybe 8, if I remember correctly. And he was a prolific writer and documented everything. And it was super helpful for her to join a company where all the previous data write-ups were very visible to everybody. The methodology was visible to everybody. The tooling was written up and described pretty well. And And for her to be able to absorb the history of an organization and the history of a role because she could read up on it was huge. Because as people leave companies, they take institutional knowledge with them. And once that's gone, in most cases, it's gone. That person who knew that thing they're gone. And if they hadn't written it up, it would have been gone too. So it's so valuable for new people to come into an organization and be able to read up. And this is also the problem with email. People are like, well, you can use chat, like chat replaces email. Well, both of those suck in a lot of ways because it's, first of all, the problem with email is it's decentralized. That someone comes into a new company and if everyone's just been emailing back and forth, well, there's no like universal inbox for every email that's been sent across the entire company for everybody. And so like, yeah, you've been writing things down, but they're not centralized in a browsable, searchable way for future people to come in and read those conversations. So email is not great for that. And chat, has anyone here ever tried to read back a chat transcript? Imagine joining a company and someone saying, here, read the last 3 years of this chat transcript that's going back and forth between a dozen conversations on a given day. It's impossible. You cannot do it and learn anything. It's horrible. Chat sucks for this. Email sucks for this. You need something like Basecamp, which has a centralized message board with topics or subjects that are named clearly and the entire conversation about those individual things attached directly to those initial messages that were posted. Accessible to everybody, organized by date, organized by topic, organized by by the person who wrote it, organized by category. It's a beautiful way to go back and read up on things that happen, and also for an organization to keep things on the record for decisions that were made and why they were made and that sort of thing. So the choice is not chat or email. And when I hear chat companies talking about like the future is the channel, not the inbox, I'm like, no, that's a shitty future too. That's not the future. That's well, it is a future. It's a future of chaos, and it's a mess and a disorganized future. You actually want something in between both of those things, and that's what Basecamp is all about. The message board, conversations attached to to-dos, conversations attached to documents, so everything is in context in one predictable place. You don't have to scour long transcripts or scour inboxes that you don't even have access to find what you need. So anyway, that's a little bit of a rant, but these are nuances that matter, and they matter not only now, but they'll matter years from now. And the sooner you start getting this right, the better off you're going to be today and tomorrow. So I think it's very important stuff to focus on.
It seems like a minor difference at a glance, but the leverage can be huge. You know, even if you're saving 5 or 10% of your time, if you put any value towards employee time at all, it's a huge lever. You're just making that change.
Totally.
Ryan actually has his internet fixed, so he's able to join us. Ryan Singer is our head of strategy.
Okay.
I'm going to add him right now.
Let's do it.
There he is. Hey, Ryan.
Oh my goodness.
How's your internet? All fixed?
I'm breathing the oxygen of internet again. It's very nice.
Well, now that Ryan's here, I mean, we'll probably do another dedicated one at some point, but now that Ryan's here, like Ryan's our head of strategy here. Ryan's, how long have you been? 17 years? How long have you been?
Yeah, 17 years now. It'll be in July.
So Ryan is one of the original Basecamp creators. So me, Ryan, and David are the 3 Basecamp people who are still left at the business that launched the original version of Basecamp. So Ryan's seen everything. He knows how the business works. And today his main focus is figuring out what to do next, where we should take the products, interviewing customers, understanding what our customers are doing and struggling with and what their jobs are like and those sorts of things. So I'm glad that you're able to join us now. I'm going to tweet this out, so I might be typing for a second to say, hey, Ryan's on board now, so please come on in.
Yeah, and Ryan, if you're ready, I've actually got one that I think is right up your alley, a question.
Sure thing.
Let's roll it. It's addressed to us, but you're here. How does your product team collect product market fit data from your customers?
Oh, this is actually kind of, I think this is a good one for Jason, actually.
Oh.
Actually, there's 2 aspects to this, you know. One is we don't really have any product market fit data. I think if we did, the closest I could say is how are signups looking and how are cancellations looking. Very, very simple metrics. Like if people are paying for the product, then it's something's working, right? And if people are buying it and then they don't stay, okay, then something would not be working. But if they buy it and they actually continue to stay and continue to pay us, then that's the best signal that we have for fit. there's a difference between measuring sort of purchase and measuring consumption. And measuring consumption is really interesting to see sort of what are they using, how much are they using it, but making sense out of that, first of all, measuring it is hard, and then interpreting it is really hard as well. So when it comes to sort of trying to understand data for that, which would normally mean something quantitative, I prefer to lean on the interviews for that. So we're getting a very, very big, broad picture from signups and cancellations if there's some sort of a fit. And then there's a question of, well, what does it actually mean and what's actually working and what's not working? And to do that, we want to get into a picture that's not correlative. So rather than just having a bunch of data points that are sort of lining up and trying to figure out what that means, we can talk to customers who recently bought, and we can sort of do a kind of interrogation that reverse engineers the buying process. What was happening? What else did you look at? Why was this the time? If they didn't buy at a certain moment, what held you back, right? And then we can sort of get the context of what they're actually doing with Basecamp and what Basecamp is doing for them. And we do the same process of talking to customers who are canceling, and we're learning sort of what's working and what's not working in a situational basis, in a cause and effect sort of chain of dominoes pushing each other over type of a way. And that way, instead of just looking at some metrics, we're kind of getting a ton of color and detail about what's actually going on in the real world for people, and kind of how Basecamp fits into that.
I love it. One of our friend Bob Moesto does a lot of this work, has the example of buying a mattress at Costco. You don't decide to buy the mattress just on a whim. You don't show up. You've been thinking about it probably for, a year. And finally, there was some confluence of factors that got you to do it that day. Just looking at mattress deals doesn't really help you understand what led to that. And there's so much that goes into it and so much of the complexity. And it's just cool to unpack those things. I love that work.
Ask yourself the question, like if I had data, let's say, on how many to-dos people create, like, well, what does that actually mean? What's the right number of to-dos to create? Like, for example, like I pay for Dropbox, and I'm very, very satisfied and happy with my Dropbox account. But how often do I use Dropbox on a daily basis? I'm not someone who's actually sharing files with other coworkers through Dropbox every day. Like maybe once a week I put something into Dropbox, and then maybe, once every 3 weeks I look at something on Dropbox. But I rely on that to be there for certain things, right? So if you compare me with somebody who is committing changes to a file on Dropbox with other people, every few hours, because that's where they hold their assets that they both work off of, those are two very different circumstances with a different sort of definition of value. And you might say that one is a good customer and one is a bad customer, but you have to wrap it in the context of the situation of how they value it to actually make that judgment. So like product market fit is dependent on the circumstance that the person is in, and not every customer is in the same circumstance, and not every customer is going to value it in the same way.
Let's take a little bit different one. What are the differences between managing a software service company and building your own product? For those who don't have the history, we started as a web design agency, I believe. Maybe Jason, you can go into this a bit. Yeah,
we started out and Ryan was with me back then as a web design company, that was great. We were doing website design for hire. People had a website. We either redesigned it or brought them online for the first time, that sort of thing. And then we slowly transitioned over time to building this Basecamp thing because we were getting really busy and had no other way to manage our projects. In fact, early on, we were using a self-published internal blog type thing to like post updates and files for clients. It was sort of fine for a moment, but it was manual, didn't really work very well. So we wanted to build something else. Now, we didn't decide at that moment to say, we're going to make a piece of software called Basecamp, and that's going to allow us to not have to do customer or web design work anymore. we didn't make that decision. We said, we're going to build this thing for ourselves and we're going to see what happens and we're going to use it. And if no one else uses it, that's fine. In fact, it wasn't even intended to be used by anyone else initially. But as we started using it, our clients said, what is this thing? Can I use it? We, eventually, oh, other people want this. And we transitioned slowly. We put something out on the market. We put a price on it. And about a year and a half later, it was doing more money than generating more revenue, I should say, than our consulting or web design business. We stopped doing that. The difference is subtle, actually. In one case, well, it's subtle and large. In one case, the major difference is that when you're running like a software company, or I'm sorry, a services company like website design, you've got to find new clients all the time. You do a project ends, you got to find another client, or you work with the same client again. But like you're month to month, you're client to client to pay the bills in a sense. With software as a service, at least, you have a predictable monthly revenue because people are signed up and they're paying every month. And so you're not out there selling and searching for the next customer in the same way that you are if you're a web design firm. But as far as like managing it, it doesn't feel that different to me. There's more criticality in terms of what we do today because we have customers, millions of people using our products, relying on availability and relying on us to be up, which we don't have when we were doing website design. So there's different focus of energy, but it's still energy that has to be put somewhere. So it's either in sales or it's either in on ops or whatever it might be. But I don't really think that they're that different. In fact, I kind of feel like ever since I've been 15, I've been running the same business, which is making something that I want and charging other people for it. And it's the same business as when I was doing like music organizing software. It's just, you make something you want first. And you could say like, well, did I want to make other people's websites? Well, I wanted to make websites. Like I liked making websites. So, hey, if someone's going to pay me to do that, then there we go. That's kind of how that whole thing worked out.
One thing that I'm seeing is people come with questions about ShapeUp and questions about our process. And I'm seeing that there's quite a few companies who are trying to build a product. And then, and the idea is that, at like Basecamp, everybody uses the same product. All their customers use the same product so that when they make changes to the product, they're kind of, in theory, thinking about the customer base as a whole. But what can happen is they start to actually have a small number of clients that are paying them a lot of money. And then they get into a situation where they're calling themselves a product company, but the money is coming from just a few customers. And so what they're actually operating as a services company where they're doing specific feature build outs or specific integrations for a small number of people. And this creates a massive tension with whoever's actually leading product, because the product person is like, well, I'm supposed to be working on the product and I can never get the developer time because it's always going toward these specific client things. So this have actually a mix of service and product in at the same time. This can actually be a cause of a lot of confusion and a lot of sort of like resource allocation, like what the hell is going on? How come we're not working on the thing that I thought we're supposed to be working on? That's a good thing to look for and kind of untangle.
Yeah, it's kind of the Faustian bargain of having a big enterprise customer is that, they might buy a ton of seats from you and, you're swimming in it, but you're working for them, and whatever features or changes they want, they're going to get. So, our pricing model kind of eschews the enterprise customer, and a lot of people are surprised by that, but I think it works well for us. Like I like that we have a focus on small business and small customers. Looks like Jason's video is dropped, but we have a ton of questions in for you, Ryan. Here's one. Oh, he's back.
Yeah, I'm tethering on LTE because my Wi-Fi is down too.
It's all the Netflix, man. Now everyone's watching that Tiger show.
Yeah, so I may be in or out. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see.
We'll give Ryan a few. Oh, did Ryan freeze again? Oh no.
This is fantastic. At least he froze while he was smiling.
Yeah, that's how he'll be remembered.
Yeah. Well, let's see what happens here. Let's give him a second and see what happens.
Uh-oh. I'm the last man standing. No, Jason's is down too. Sorry, everybody. Looks like we've got some internet issues. Oh, he's back.
Did you lose me? I'm
There
back
you
in
are.
here.
Yeah.
All right. Gosh, this is embarrassing.
We'll see if Ryan's video kicks back in.
Yeah, I'll answer this one, although Ryan may have another answer for this. We've always thought this way about thinking in bets, which is this idea, no such thing as a sure bet. That doesn't exist in the world, basically. And a lot of companies are obsessed with getting to certainty. We're more about the odds. We've always thought about the odds. What are the odds that this would be worth doing? What is our appetite for this sort of thing? How much do we really care about this thing? And what are we willing to wager on it? And that's kind of the big idea behind bets, is that we're wagering, we're making a bet. And there's limited downside risk, which is like how much are we willing to bet, right? So if we're willing to bet a month's worth of work and it turns out it wasn't worth it, well, we're not going to lose 2 months worth of work. We're just going to lose a month. So that's what's beautiful about bets, which is very different than thinking about things in terms of well, we have to build this thing no matter what, and we're certain it's going to work. So if it takes us 9 months or 2 years or 4 years, we're all in no matter what. That seems like a really risky way to go about life. So even though we talk about bets, we're actually talking about limiting our downside risk. As far as books, there's a great book called Thinking in Bets, actually. I forget the woman who wrote it. I forget her name offhand. Which is sort of Anne, or Annie.
Annie Duke?
I forget. I don't know.
Annie
Duke. Yeah, she's a poker player who wrote this book about thinking in bets and approaching the world that way. I think it's pretty interesting. It's not really what formed this up for us, but it's an additional supporting thing. I did enjoy that book quite a bit. Although, if you don't want to read the whole book, I would recommend checking out her podcast. She did a podcast with this guy named Peter Attia. So it's Annie Duke. Google Annie Duke, Peter Attia, Attia. You'll find it. It's about 2 hours or something. It's a wonderful insight into the ideas behind the book. But anyway, that's our take. Hey, Ryan's back.
Let's try this again.
So Ryan, I just answered this one about thinking in terms of bets, but maybe I saw there was a bunch of other ones for Ryan, so maybe we can shift over to him now.
Yeah. Let's pick another one.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that briefly. I actually think that we've been thinking in terms of bets. I learned that from Jason and David all the way back, going back to 2003. I think when we all started to work together, that's naturally how they were always framing things. I remember Jason would always say, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. It was always like, let's act without knowing what's going to happen. And I feel like when I looked around at what sort of other people around at other companies were doing, there was this sense of like, no, we have to validate. And it was like, no, we don't need to validate. We need to do something, but protect our downside. You know what I mean? Like, it's better to act with a capped downside than to try and like theorize and prove the whole world before you move. And that was something I think that sort of got into my bones through working with them. And then when I started to really read a lot of Nassim Taleb's work a few years ago, that's when I started to sort of find ways of like thinking about this in terms of words and frameworks. And a lot of the stuff that we've been doing recently, like with hill charts and putting shape up into words, came from kind of connecting the dots of like our intuitive experience of how we had been doing things. And then, oh, here's some ways to actually kind of formalize this and express it.
Yeah, I'm just digging into Nassim Taleb myself, reading the one about skin in the game. That's what I'm reading right now. Yeah, big fan.
Hey, Andy, real quick. Also keep an eye on the hash AskJFRS, because there's some questions coming in there.
Ooh, we got a new one. Cool. Ask JFRS. Got it. Let me grab, I saw a great one for Ryan up here. No, that's not the one. Best resources for jobs to be done. Do you have a go-to resources for that? Well, you talked a little bit before about this.
Yeah, the best way to start from nothing is to read the book Competing Against Luck by Clay Christensen. That's the best intro. And then that's going to give you sort of the outer context and the basic idea of the thing and kind of where it fits in and why and when you would use it. And then from there, it becomes a question of getting into contact with practice, and especially interview technique. And for that, I would look out for one of Bob Mesta's workshops. He does workshops from time to time that are usually called The Switch. And so keep an eye out for one of those workshops. And then, because it's really it's a garage thing, it's a practice thing, it's a get your hands dirty thing. And you want to learn that from somebody who knows it.
I love this question just came in through the hashtag, because I think the answer you're going to give is the counter to what people think they're going to get. Emma asks, how long did it take you to write and publish Shape Up? I think we forget how much time certain things take. Can you tell us a little bit?
Yeah, so the writing, I think I actually haven't thought about it exactly, but it was on the order of 3 months, something like that. I think to actually now is the time to write the book. You know what I mean? And open the text editor and start the writing. I think it was something like that. And then publishing was nearly instantaneous thanks to Adam's work. He put the web book together, and he did an amazing job with that, and that allowed us to just put the thing out immediately. I mean, as soon as the draft felt readable, I think we had the thing online.
And if I remember correctly, you had done a workshop of sorts, or a workshop for real, before you wrote the book, basically to see how you explained a process to people that you were already using.
Yeah, I mean, a big reason why the book came together so quickly was because, well, first of all, there was a long period of getting the ideas together. I mean, it was 10 plus years of iterating on the actual ideas, of course. But then when Jason suggested writing the book, I had no idea what to do and how to pursue that. So instead of just going straight into something I didn't know how to do, I started with something I did know how to do, which was to host a workshop. So the workshop was a prototyping opportunity. So we did the workshop in December of whatever that was. Was that 2019? No, that would have been 2018. Mm-hmm. And then actually put a high price tag on the workshop and really screened and filtered who could come. And then did actually a jobs to be done project on the workshop attendees to figure out what was important to them, why they valued it, what they were trying to get out of it. And then that kind of actually gave a really clear framework for what needed to go into the book in order for the book to work. And then mapped out the book into some systems that it had to perform. And that sort of gave me the structure to knock it out pretty quickly.
I actually attended your workshop in Detroit just before I started Basecamp. It was cool to see the process in your workshop and then see it in Basecamp for real. Mm-hmm. Very worthwhile. And also the link below goes to the book, which you can read for free online. This isn't a sales pitch for the book because it's free. Very beautiful, very cool site that you can read online, then go back to. You can save your place. It's a super cool thing Adam did. Let's do a little more time machine. Gonna try to copy and paste this here. The question is, if we rewind back to day 0 of your journey, what product development tools or learnings would you apply? Basically, if you're building Basecamp today, what would you do? There it is. And how much of Shape Up is applicable to a startup product development? Probably new ideas, I think they're thinking.
You want to take that, Ryan, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing things the exact same way we did in the beginning. Actually, really, nothing substantial has changed at all. The
cycles probably are the only thing that, we didn't used to work in 6-week cycles. We'd maybe sometimes take 3 months to do something. So I think that the time capping maybe is the one major difference.
Yeah, when the part that's the same is when we start. So when we start a brand new product, that's the part that hasn't changed at all. The thing is that the practices that we write up in Shape Up, a lot of the specific steps of shaping what you're going to do, pitching it, betting on that specific thing, getting the team to build it, you can't actually hand off work to somebody else when you don't even know what you're building yet. So there's a transition point that you have to go through, and there's an appendix at the back of the book now which says new versus existing product development that talks about this. And we have been using for years the language of R&D mode versus production mode. And when we're doing a completely brand new product, like with hay, for example, the first few cycles of hay are not going to be perfectly shaped pitches that then go to a different team, and then the team is going to figure out how to execute on those. Rather, what we're going to do is we're going to time box just a period of time and say, look, for the next 6 weeks, a few of us are going to explore this idea for this 1 or 2 sort of tentpole features that we think are going to be worthwhile. And we don't know how it's going to fit together. We don't know what the underlying architecture is going to be. We don't even know if this is going to hang together and if it's going to work, but we're going to kind of swing at it and spike at it. And this is really what we talked about in our first book, Getting Real. It was about like, get in there and start just building something and kind of learn by building. Exactly. And so like in the case of hay, that's Jason and David and Jonas was involved very heavily from the beginning, working together where they don't actually even know what they're building, but they have like a few kind of rough hunches of what's going to be worthwhile. And it's very experimental. And then you get to a point where you've put that, let's say 6 weeks into, we're just going to see if we can build a couple of these key features that we believe in. And you reach a point where there is some code that's working. You do have an underlying architecture that has some sort of concrete poured in it where you're like, okay, these pieces of the architecture aren't going to move anymore, right? And then you get to a point where this early beginning app, it has some load-bearing structures in it. It has some things that aren't going to change. It has a couple basic things that are doing enough that you feel like there's value there. And now there's a million things that you have to flesh out and fill out. And there aren't as many scary, very deep fundamental questions where you're going to be ripping out all the plumbing and starting from scratch again. And when you reach that point, that's where you flip from R&D mode to production mode.
Oh, do I have to pick up where you left off?
And go.
All right, where you flip from production mode to R&D mode, and then you become, or actually the other way, R&D mode to production mode, and you become a lot more rigid about your, is he back? No, rigid about your cycles. So that's when you really get into the 6-week cycles, the bets that you make, the big bets, the smaller bets, the big batch, the small batch projects, and then you go cycle by cycle by cycle by cycle until you're done. Although for hay, what we've realized is that the last 2 cycles or so, you want to have a little bit less structured work and more open space for things that come up. Because when you're building something from scratch, from brand new, as you approach the end, things bubble up that you missed, didn't think about, didn't care so much about earlier that you care about now. So in the last couple cycles are a little bit less planned. But yeah, we've been 6-week cycles for hay for about 1.5 years now. The product's essentially done. We're just now postponing the launch a little bit, but because of the COVID stuff. But that's how that works.
And the 2-week cooldown between cycles is really critical too for this sort of like explorations and thinkings, and it's sort of the breathing room that doesn't need to be so structured that I find really rewarding.
Yeah, one thing I kind of regret using that terminology because I think people think it means that you're like overheated, that you're like sprinting and out of breath. It's really not that. It's just a pause. For everybody to kind of freelance internally and figure out like little pet projects they wanted to do that aren't scheduled, or they want to tighten something up that they just shipped, or people need some time to think. It's not about like catching your breath or really cooling down. It's really just about spare time at the end and buffer between 2 things. Like
a free period. Yeah, not cool down.
It's like grout between tiles. It's a little bit flexible. You don't want to butt tiles right. You need a little bit of space, and it makes up for the uneven edges and all that kind of stuff between things. So I think it's good. You want a little bit of room there.
Cool.
I saw a question on Twitch I wanted to hit actually.
Yeah.
When do we use email, and how do we know when comments are done when you comment on something? Can you pop that up?
Yep. That was my next one. I think this will probably be our last one.
Okay. So we don't use email internally for anything. We use email externally. So to connect with, to discuss things with vendors, our accountants, lawyers, people write us letters, people write questions about books. It's how we reach out to the press, all that. So email for us is completely external, essentially. Internally, we basically only use Basecamp for all communications, long form, short form, that sort of thing. And then we also use video chat occasionally when we need to kind of really debate something or get into something in detail. How do you know when comments are done when you comment on something within a project? They just stop. They just peter out. The discussion is over. And if someone comes up and posts something again 6 weeks later, then it starts up. There's no formality here. And I've seen this question before, and it's an interesting one because I think people are always looking for formality, how to end something and make sure it's over. Things just end. Things just end naturally, and then they're done. And it's essentially closed until it's reopened. Instead of having a distinct moment where you say closed, and then you have to have software that says close, and then you have to have software that says reopen. It's more complicated to do it that way than just to let things peter out naturally. So that's kind of how we approach that, I think.
I actually suspect that there's another problem behind this question, which is that I suspect that you don't know how you make decisions, and you don't know who gets to decide. If you know who makes the call, and you're very clear about the boundaries of how this thing gets figured out, then somebody asks a question, somebody gives an answer, and the conversation's over. You know what I mean? But if it's a question of well, we don't know how to decide, and we don't know how to choose, and we don't know what to do, then you have a sort of a never-ending kind of committee meeting that's happening.
Yeah, there we go. So yeah, I think that's a great point too. If you need someone to say it's over, then it's probably there probably are a lot of open questions to begin with. So I think what Ryan just added there was really valuable, and I think he was probably wrapping that up, but that makes sense. So I think I'd love to go longer with problems. We probably should schedule another 3-way once we have another day of good internet behind us. So maybe we'll do this again next week or something, but focus on product strategy. There's a ton of questions. I'm seeing them in Twitch and seeing them on Twitter. A lot of people have questions about product strategy, jobs to be done, shape up, how we decide what to do. So let's do a dedicated session on that once our internet is more reliable on all 3 sides. And sorry for those who are watching who had to endure some of this, but it was kind of fun, and we kind of figured it out as we went, but clearly we didn't get it all figured out. So next week, hopefully this will be behind us and we can do a full dedicated session on product strategy.
Looking forward to it.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.
See y'all.